Right. Hi, everyone. So I'm Nada Koreish, and I'm just here to introduce the lovely Dr. James Green, who I think is now, well, I'm just going to guess he's now part of the Fashion Liberation Collective. Um, and he's going to be presenting, collage in a decolonial context for us from Cairo. And I'll let you talk about your amazing work, James. You're a really talented artist and academic, and I think everything you do is so. I like to think of it as it's quite decolonial in the way you practice and the way you form your art and the way you deliver your lectures and things. I think just some background. I met you when I was looking for a supervisor to supervise me for my PhD at Cardiff Met. I'd already kind of seen James's work and also his work that he did for his PhD and his work on masks and other really interesting items. And then that's how we got to know each other. And basically, I reached out to you, I think, really early on with this project, and he's been very, very kind and generous with his time. فدول اللي هنا من مصر اللي عايز يتكلم معانا عربي بليز اتكلموا معانا عربي. عندنا ناس هنا بيتكلموا عربي، بيتكلموا فرنش، بيتكلموا well, a little bit of Welsh maybe وبيتكلموا انجليزي obviously. فازيكم، انا ندى قريش. انا بديت الفاشن ليبريشن كولكتيف وهقدم لكم النهارده دكتور جيمس جرين من القاهره. هو شغال في BUE بريتش يونيفرسيتي ايجيبت. هو lecturer هناك وكمان فنان تشكيلي وفنان يعني من باك جراوند بتاع فنون جميله من UK. فاحنا مبسوطين قوي ان انتوا هنا معانا، وانا هكون بترجم لكم في نفس الوقت عشان the whole idea ان احنا نعمل a decolonial conversation. فهيكون باللغتين. Right, I just translated that, James, so you're good to go.
Great, thanks Nada. Shukran. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, I'm coming through all right? Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah, everything is
great. Thanks. So yeah, my name is James Green, and what I want to talk about today is, is not particularly to do with fashion, although I do work with fashion students in a kind of transdisciplinary way, and have worked with fashion and textile students for quite a number of years now. And what I'm going to be talking about more is about collage and what the art world is, what the fine art world is doing to take steps towards decolonializing itself. So I hope that's okay for everyone. And yeah, I hope it's interesting and that I live up to Nada's generous introduction. Thanks, Nada. So can collage be used to decolonialize art and design education? That's the big question I'm asking. Yeah, I'm glad to be a new part of the Fashion Liberation Collective. I'm really happy to be participating in the Global Fashion Assembly 2022. And I'm coming to you from, well, I'm not at home by now, which reminds me of something. If my connection cuts out, just give me 2 minutes and I'll come back in. I'm on a kind of a 4-hour connection cycle here. I work at the British University in Egypt, which is a university in El Sharout, which is in the governorate of Cairo, but you know, a bit further out into the desert. It's outside of the sort of city of Cairo. But that's where I'm based. So can anyone take a look at this image? Can anyone tell me what we're looking at right now? Feel free to answer. There's no real right or wrong answers here. Can anyone tell me what we're looking at?
I
Oh,
mean, that blue UFO looking thing at the top, I don't know
yeah.
why, it reminds me of like one of the Muppets, you know, the fur coming out of it. It's just,
I was gonna say the same thing. Not
yeah, doesn't it remind you of one of the Muppets? I can't, is it Gizmo, the blue one? But yeah, it looks like Abu Simbel. It looks like one of the, you know, that it looks like a really old kind of Orientalist painting of Abu Simbel, possibly. But
Yes,
obviously,
both those things. It's just kind of a zany, for me anyway, when I first saw it, I thought it was a bit of a zany take on, yeah, Abu Simbel. Can anyone else spot anything in the image?
I can spot loads of things. There's two nurses.
Yeah, there's two nurses, there's heads rolling around, there's a UFO shooting lasers.
So
So
what are their beards made out of?
I'm not sure, but I think it's a kind of like a leopard print piece of paper.
Oh, yeah, because I did notice the beards and the eyebrows, and then there's obviously exaggerated kind of different facial features. They remind me a bit of Picasso. I think there's some things in the chat as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, whatever. For me, I think we're looking at quite a striking image that is intriguing, and there's a lot going on, but it's, you know, was a bit difficult to understand on face value, at least. So this image is made by an artist called Ellen Gallagher. It somehow involves Sigmund Freud, the man who invented psychoanalysis. It includes the Temple of Ramesses II, a temple in Abu Simbel, Aswan, Egypt, a monumental temple. It also somehow involves George Clinton, the father of P-Funk, the lead singer of Funkadelic, as well as the American jazz musician Sun Ra. So all of these ideas and worlds and elements are included somehow in this image, which is a collage image by Ellen Gallagher. And we're going to come back to it later. But the reason I wanted to open with this is because obviously it's got something to do with Egypt and ancient Egypt. The UFO and the materials used gives it some kind of contemporary twist. And it's intriguing. And for me, is a classic example of how collage is a medium that can include many, many different ideas and views on life and the world within one image, if used in a certain way, like we're looking at here. So yeah, we'll come back to this in a little bit. So I thought I'd start with the basics and just ask what is colonialism and decolonialism, just as a base to start from. So I got this from the Britannica website. Western colonialism, a political economic phenomenon whereby various European nations explored, conquered, settled, and exploited large areas of the world. Was decolonialization. Decolonialization is about cultural, psychological, and economic freedom for indigenous people with the goal of achieving indigenous sovereignty, the right and ability of people to practice self-determination over their land, cultures, and political and economic systems. So I got this definition from a TED talk by Nikki Sanchez. Now, I work, like I said, at the British University in Egypt, and I'm aware that I'm a white British guy teaching in what once was a British colony for quite a number of years. So this is something you know, decolonialization is something I think about all the time. Is the history of it is on my mind. And I'll tell you a little bit more of what I'm trying to do about it later on. We'll come back to it. So yeah, like I just said, there I am. That's the place where I teach and work in Shuruk. And for me, it there's positive sides to it, but it just feels weird sometimes. And I'm still coming to grips with it. I've been here in Egypt teaching for almost 2 years, from January 2021. And this is an image of me teaching. Since before coming here, I've tried to teach decolonialization, post-colonial theory, using my teaching practice to promote equality, equal rights, understanding of all cultures equally. And that often takes me out of the classroom, working with students, working with people in the community, doing things to raise awareness for different kinds of rights and all of this kind of thing. So it's not like I'm just in a classroom lecturing and teaching in a very traditional manner. I'm out there, often learning from students. The knowledge goes both ways. So in a broad sense, what have museums done about decolonialization in art? Many museums and institutions around the world, particularly in the West, it seems, have artifacts and artworks from all over the world. Some of them have been acquired lawfully and fairly, but many of them seem to have been acquired in a way that hasn't been fair, or has been, illegal or exploitative or unfair. And some questions that we can ask is, how were these objects acquired? Who were they acquired by? For whom are they on show? And at whose cost? And these are some of the questions I sometimes think about when I'm in some of my favorite museums, like the British Museum here in London. And in the British Museum, for me, this is one of the most intriguing galleries. It's the gallery of, I think it's known as the Gallery of Living and Dying. And it's quite a stark place to be, because it's got all kinds of objects from around the world that are somehow linked to the experience of being alive, and then how to deal with death. Central to this gallery is a Maui from Rapa Nui, Easter Island. I used to look at this a lot when I was a kid. It filled me with awe and wonder, but I didn't really understand what it was at the time, or the fact that it being in the museum, how it's affected the community that it was taken from. So as I said, this is a stone Maui from Easter Island. Easter Island is an island in the Pacific Ocean. It's one of the most remotest inhabited places on Earth. And if you go there, one of the first things you realize is that there are these stone statues kind of planted around the peripheral of the island looking inwards. They're known as Maui, and they represent ancestors, and they're there to protect the island. So 2 of these were taken in 1868 and by a British fleet, and given to the Queen as a present against the will of the Rapa Nui people. So a written request for the return of Hoa Hakananaio and Maui Hava, the 2 Maui, was made on behalf of Rapa Nui in July 2018. And this is still ongoing. Since then, there have been discussions about a memorandum of understanding between the museum and the Rapa Nui community regarding possible collaborative projects. The museum recognizes the significance of Hoa Hakananaio Hakananai Al Maui Hava for the Rapa Nui community today, and acknowledges the impact of their removal from the island in 1868. So they still exist in the museum to this day. Another museum that I used to visit a lot when I was a child was the Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford. And this is if you haven't been there, this is a museum that is the collections were made by a general in the army, General Pitt Rivers. I can't remember the exact dates, but he traveled the world collecting many of the artifacts in this collection. Here's another shot. You can see things like totem poles, statues, figures, plates, cutlery, effigies, these kinds of things. One moment, sorry. And again, in more recent times, is another museum that is starting to understand that the collections and some of the objects that they have been taken from people. So treasures seized during Britain's colonial past are kept in museums across the country. But as times change, how do such institutions deal with the sensitive issue of human remains in their collections? We can't undo history, but we can be a part of the process of healing, says Laura van Brockhoven, director of the Pitt Rivers Museum. The Pitt Rivers has returned 22 such objects. It's hardly a flood of returns to former colonies, but it's a start. So museums are starting to realize the fact that they have objects that really should go back to where they were taken from. This is the work of a British artist called Yinka Shonibari. We're going to come back to later. But in, I think it was 2007, Yinka Shonibari made this installation called Jardin d'Amour at a museum in Paris that, like the Pitt Rivers and the museum, the British Museum, houses objects taken from former British and French colonies. And when Yinka was being interviewed about this piece of artwork, he was asked, what does it mean for you to perform this installation in a museum of mankind where it would be surrounded by so-called traditional or primitive objects? And the response was, in a way, I feel like a contradiction. I don't like the way objects were acquired politically. Quite a number of these objects were indeed looted, and as such, they are symbols of conquest. But culturally, I'm happy that some of the objects are there and I can see them. It's a dilemma and I can't give you the answer. Do I think objects, all of them, should be given back? If the objects were given back, would they be looked after? I don't know. Is it important that the objects are looked after? Because also in some cultures, the point might be to throw the objects away after the ceremony. It's also possible that the idea of preserving the object is just a Western notion. And these are some of the things I often think about when I look around in museum collections. Number one, whether the object I'm looking at has fairly been taken from its original context and displayed in a museum in the UK, for example. Number two, not knowing the answer to that question, do I feel completely comfortable having the privilege to look at that object? And for me is kind of, in a way, is sort of reassuring knowing that there are other artists who are asking these questions. What's being done about decolonialization in art theory? Does anyone know this book, The Story of Art by Ernst Gombrich? Has anyone come across this?
I came across it a while back, but I've never like really delved into it. I think just even the look of it really put me off, which is a really strange thing to say, but I'm quite visual when it comes to books. But yeah, I've come across it briefly. And then
Yeah,
also, like, I think when you're ready, I think we had some comments as well, like in the chat about, you know, on that point of you saying about what it is to decolonize and, you know, that language behind it. So we were just saying though in the chat, it's really interesting that there's no actual word for it in a lot of languages. So in Arabic, there's no word that kind of, yeah, that means decolonize. There's a sentence, but there's no word. And it's really interesting because you're saying about, you know, how do we decolonize, and books that are, you know, relatively decolonial or the opposite. And it's really hard when the language itself is difficult in that it doesn't have terminology in other languages. But
it's also because coloniality is a Western concept, decoloniality is a non-Western concept. So it's a speaking back to coloniality.
Yeah.
Yes, but in so many languages I've been speaking to people and it's still like a really term that cannot be translated exactly. So it's an interesting point. And I think you had some questions as well, James, when you get a minute.
Okay. Yeah, but what I've been reading out so far and saying, terms like indigenous and you know, I know that they're loaded terms, and they're not my terms. They're everything I've read out so far has been, you know, quotes from books and websites and things like that. Yeah, I'm happy to talk more about it at the end of this. So that someone said that they had to learn this book in art school, and yeah, this book is in every art school museum, art school library I've seen. This book is there, and yeah, Nadi, you were saying it. I think you saying it looks like a serious book. I mean, the cover's engraved in stone. That's how serious the publishers took it. So the story of art, one of the most famous and popular books on art ever written, has been a world bestseller for over 4 decades. There are two things that are remarkably rare in this book. Women artists and the words that artists spoke or wrote are left out or rare. We live in an increasingly global world. Artists from different countries with different cultures and different traditions, ones barely touched on by Gombrich or ignored completely, now show their work internationally. Gombrich did mention, albeit briefly, Mughal miniatures in his token chapter on Asian art, but the art of Australian indigenous people he passed by in silence. So this was written by Tony Godfrey, who has written a kind of answer to the story of art, the story of contemporary art. You'll find many more women artists in this book. Indeed, key to the story of this book is how the perception that art is made almost exclusively by white men from North America and Western Europe has expanded into one that art is made by men and women of all colors from all parts of the world. So I thoroughly recommend this book. It's great. So this was a catalogue for the global contemporary and the rise of new art worlds by Hans Belting, Andrea Bundersieg, and Peter Weibel. And they say 21st century art testifies to worldwide contemporaneity without limits of the kind imposed by the Western privilege of history. Contemporary art today means art after modernism, just as it once meant modern art. Modern art always had the purpose of absolute power. Modern art history separated the world since it wasn't everyone's history, which you can see if you read The Story of Art by Gombrich. So it seems that art historians are trying to address this issue within art history. And David Summers sets forth that current formalist, conceptual, contextual, and post-structural approaches fail to provide an adequate account of all art, particularly art produced outside the Western tradition. He argues that there are profound problems right at the heart of Western thinking about art, and his new framework is an attempt to resolve these problems. Writing about David Summers' book, James Elkins said, "Scholarship that is attentive to non-Western concepts and methods is arguably the most promising and intellectually difficult future for a world art history." But there is a final possibility, which may turn out to be the de facto state of affairs. Art history may disappear as a field. The notion of interdisciplinarity is already being augmented by transdisciplinarity and subdisciplinarity. Following those leads, what is currently known as art history might deliquesce, leaving only traces of its former sense of methods and objects. And Real Spaces, the book that we were just looking at, is the most thorough description of what art history might look like if it retains its disciplinary shape and its allegiance to the West. This book is also, for me anyway, trying to teach a sort of more opened out art history is a really good one. The majority of the texts are representations of changing ideas about the cultures of the world by European artists and intellectuals. Increasingly, as the modern period develops, and especially as colonialism is challenged, a variety of dissenting voices begin to claim their space, and a counter-narrative to Western hegemony develops. And so what are curators doing about decolonialization? Since this is Paulo Barata, he's sort of runs the Venice Biennale. Throughout the past couple of Venice Biennales, he's been writing about opening the Venice Biennale out. So since 1998, the art and architecture editions of the Biennale are no longer mere exhibitions organized by national pavilions, but structured by two main pillars: an exhibition by national pavilions, each with its own curator and project, and an international exhibition organized by the Biennale, which appoints a curator for this specific task. All this has given rise to a plurality of voices and has generated a new and very interesting story. Our aim is to investigate how the tensions of the outside world act on the sensitivities and vital expressive energies of artists, on their desires and their inner song. One of the reasons the Biennale invited Achoubi and Wezor was because of his special sensitivity in this regard. Wezor summoned 136 artists from 53 different countries, many from geographical areas we paradoxically insist on defining as peripheral. The presence alongside our curator of the different voices of the curators of the different pavilions contributes to the emergence of an important value: the pluralism of voices. And we are an international exhibition, a complex international exhibition. Some people raised doubt that cosmopolitanism might also have been a way for dominant societies and economies to exert a sort of soft power. But once again, I believe that the attention given to minority artists as a consequence of these preoccupations must develop in the direction of further openness. In turn, our exhibition must be open and without boundaries in order to represent art as a phenomenon of humanity. So this is all well and good. However, there has been studies done that would say that still things like the Venice Biennale and Documenta are still, in a way, colonial. The fact that artists from remote areas now appear center stage in Western events such as Castle Documenta or the Venice Biennale is often taken as further proof that the distinction between center and periphery has collapsed. The Biennale, the most popular institutional mechanism of the last 2 decades for the organization of large-scale international exhibitions, has, despite its decolonializing and democratic claims, proved still to embody the traditional power structures of the contemporary Western art world. The only difference being that Western has quietly been replaced by a new buzzword, global. This was part of the conclusion of a paper called Biennales Without Borders. And the author found that many of the sort of non-Western artists felt that they had to move to places like London and New York to be able to get noticed. So yeah, even though we've seen that the curators are saying all of this, it might not actually be what's happening in practice. What are artists doing about this? In 2017, I saw an exhibition called Navigation Charts by an artist called Lubaina Himid. And this piece of artwork is called Naming the Money. Lubaina Himid's an artist and a curator. And in an exhibition catalogue for art from West Africa held in Manchester City, she said, in the art place, what may seem strange and foreign to some curators can be deep and personal to some participants. Art from West Africa, for instance, is not strange and foreign if you have lived in West Africa or if your ancestors come from West Africa. The story is not strange or foreign either if you've looked at the work of Yinka Shonabari or Chris O'Feely or Claudette Johnson, Barbara Walker or Chantal Oakes. The best artists make art to forge surprising yet long-lasting connections with people, both foreign and familiar, to reveal insights and to make juxtapositions, to astonish and to make the space for dreaming the impossible. And this was from a recent-ish exhibition, 2011. It was called Kangas from the Lost Sample Book, held in Hull. Himid presents each sample with a small collage portrait that suggested the type of woman who might connect their individual way to their motto. Kangas are also about women that wear them. When my grandmother wanted to go to a wedding, she and her friends would make my father buy a whole set of kangas. So they would all wear the same kanga and all go together, all of one piece. There's something that connects these artists together, which we'll come to in a bit. This is another artist that I've been looking at recently. Born in Nassau, Bahamas, where he grew up in the community of Grantstown until 2004. LeVar Monroe grew up in a deprived urban environment. While navigating the contentious spaces of gang violence, incarceration, and substance abuse as a youth, Monroe began to observe his environment more closely, the dark underbelly of Bahamian life, perpetuated by extreme poverty and social inequality, counterbalances his celebration of a proud community in which many thrived and fought for better lives in spite of their underprivileged economic status. Munro's material arrangements seek to question the idea of cultural value while critiquing the very social circumstances that brought such matter into being. And Munro's painting practice incorporates elements of assemblage and collage with composite pieces stitched and glued into a larger whole, anthropomorphic figures that vacillate between the playful and macabre are the central motifs of his large-scale canvases. Often incorporating found and discarded materials, Munro creates rich, painterly works that foreground his interest in history, anthropology, and sociology. Kay Hassan's work I've been following since I saw it in 2015, again at the Venice Biennale. And he's known for his large-scale immersive paper constructions and has been exhibiting his work in South Africa and internationally since 1980. His work reflects an economy of presence and takes into account social experiences of the everyday. These concepts are communicated through his media of choice, shredded advertising posters, scavenged from around the city and repurposed into highly effective collages. And they're big, much larger than life size. The portraits and his technique are inspired by the people of Johannesburg. He says that our lives have always been torn and put together. People have always been pushed around. You see it in the streets, in the kids begging, and the way they look at you. So his work comes from the streets, his torn up film posters, advertising hoardings, and he pastes them back together to create these large scale portraits. And back to Yinka Shonibari, who's a British artist of Nigerian descent. Shonibari came to prominence in the 1990s, and his trademark multicolored cotton textiles, evidence not as a widely supposed primitive art or of ethnic taste, but of overlooked cultural hybridity of the work in the period of imperialism. The textiles are based on Indonesian designs, but they were machine produced in 19th century Britain for export to West Africa. Shonibari has since become a leading figure in art addressing issues of identity in a post-colonial condition. This is the work of Tavares Strachan, another artist I'm following closely, particularly his series called the Encyclopedia Britannica. So he's making his own version of it. So Encyclopedia Britannica, first published in 1768, clings to certain old world authority. Growing up in the Bahamas, a former British colony, Tavares Strachan came to understand the Encyclopedia Britannica as a tool for imperial conquest, one that appropriates and condenses knowledge as a means of signaling cultural domination. Strachan became interested in everything the encyclopedia left out. So this is just one image in a big series of work that investigates the Encyclopedia Britannica and what's been included in it, what's been left out of it, and what that means. Another artist is called Njeka Akunyili Crosby, and her work reflects her experience of the contemporary Nigerian diaspora, depicting a specific cultural and national identity that are unfamiliar to many, though instantly recognizable to those who have followed a similar path. The spaces described in these pictures are by their very nature indeterminate. Certain details indicate a cold climate, such as New York, where the artist lived for a time, while others are drawn from Crosby's memories of Nigeria. And we're back to this image, a collage by Ellen Gallagher of a UFO, it looks like a UFO shooting Abu Simbel. So Abu Simbel is the name of the collage, the title. It's by the artist Ellen Gallagher and is a reworked version of a print that hung in Sigmund Freud's library depicting the ancient Egyptian site of the Temple of Ramses II. Gallagher uses elements of collage from post-war magazines, as well as Sun Ra's 1972 Afrofuturist science fiction film Space is the Place, in which Sun Ra has been sent to Earth to rescue downtrodden African Americans and to take them back to his astral utopia. Gallagher combines historic and futuristic elements to create a newly imagined mythical universe that is both speculative and critical. The artist describes the work as a tricked out, multi-directional flow from Freud to ancient Egypt to Sun Ra to George Clinton. So all of these elements are kind of mixed in with this piece of work. The reason I showed you those artists in particular is because all of them, except for Yinka Shinobari, I mean, he does use collage, but all of them use collage as a central method in their way of working. In the case of Ndjeka's work, essentially they're paintings, but they're made up of collaged elements. If you look at this image closely, you can see that the floors and the walls are made up of transfer prints of photographs and images taken from textiles. There's also drawing involved, lots of different methods and materials, but essentially, I would say, is a collage. And going back through the list, collage is what connects these artists. So why is collage an effective method to use towards decolonization? The answer is right now, I don't know, but I have a feeling. So a long time ago in 1919, there was an artist working called Kurt Schwitters, and he was making collages that combined lots and lots of different elements, and the combination of all conceivable material for artistic purposes, and technically the principle of equal evaluation of the individual materials. A perambulator wheel, wire netting, string and cotton wool are factors having equal rights with paint. The artist creates through the choice, distribution and metamorphosis of the materials used. And Schwitters has shown that it's possible to make art out of anything, so long as one is an artist. Use tram tickets, pieces of cardboard or corrugated paper, corks, matches, everything is grist to the creative imagination. And then later in 2016, in a book called The Age of Collage 2, collage is often said to be the medium of the 20th century, and so far that of the 21st century too. Yet what truly makes collage the medium of our epoch is the fact that it reflects and responds to some of modern life's key issues and phenomena. Collage can be understood as mirroring the patchwork experience of globalization, through which elements carry differing, sometimes even opposing histories, brought together in a layering of cultures. Collage is also transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary, offering a space for collaboration and discussions for students from a range of creative disciplines, something I discussed in a recent paper about a collage project that I delivered. Based on collaborations I've undertaken with collage artists from around the world through the postal system, I would argue that collage can be used to open creative spaces for people no matter who they are, where they're from, or whether they have artistic skills or not. So it's a very democratic medium. So what am I doing about decolonialization in art? Well, I'm trying to do my best. So back in 2006, I was lucky enough to be studying at the Royal College of Art in London, and I was stuck. I didn't know what to do. So I decided to make one small drawing a day based on something that happened that day. And the idea was that these drawings, they didn't have to mean anything. They weren't meant to be shown to anyone. It was just a kind of a method for getting my brain back on track. I made these drawings each day without going into the studio, and they slowly developed into collages. I worked at home alone for about 2 months and only went to the studio to socialize. And I often used materials that I found around me. This was meant to be for a 2-week period. I was going to make 14 of these things, and hopefully by then my ideas would start coming back. And it's developed into a big piece of work that has gone on for 17 and a half years now. I make these every day and use them to teach with. And to collaborate with people. And since coming to Egypt, I've continued making these collages. So this is at home in Sharuk, where I live. And like I said earlier, each collage is based on some kind of daily experience or idea or thought, something I've learned, a discussion maybe, these kinds of things. And yeah, like I said, I use them to talk to people, collaborate with. I do collage workshops, and for me, it really, well, I'll tell you all about it in the next couple of slides. So yeah, I teach collage at the British University in Egypt. So when I arrived, I was part of a small team writing the modules that we're currently teaching. And some of the points that the course delivers that I think is important for what we're talking about today is that the course provides an environment in which you can develop an awareness of the diversity of media and practices available to contemporary fine art mixed media, to develop your own individual practice at a high level within the area of contemporary fine art media with appropriate knowledge, understanding, skills and strategies, and enabling you to relate your practice to a relevant critical framework, both contemporary and historical. And I think what's being discussed in this conference is important to all of these points. Enable you to respond effectively to a rapidly developing range of careers in the wider creative industries in a local and global context. Allow you to develop an understanding of the importance of collaborative work and to be able to work as part of a creative collaborative group, and to develop your awareness of an ethical fine art practice that reflects the community responsibility of fine artists I think this last one is the most important. So we delivered a collage workshop, which was, we were meant to, we were hoping to film it and to make a short film for you to watch today, but it just didn't happen in the end. So we took lots of photographs, and I hope they will be, they will illustrate what we did, so you can see what we did. And it ties into a module, a theoretical module titled Introduction to Fine Art Context. And this is the summary. This is a theory-based module. This theory-based module will begin with how a painting from around 1850 might be read within the context of a colonial Western and predominantly patriarchal society. From there, other perspectives will be brought into play that will begin to provide you with an awareness of contemporary fine art context that embraces all cultures equally. You'll be given a question to research, and you'll write a 500-word essay that will make, or an equivalent presentation. By the end of the module, a global understanding of contemporary fine art practice will have begun to emerge, which you will begin to use to inspire and inform your practical work in your practical modules. So the idea of this module is to open up students' understanding of the history of art and contemporary art from the time when colonial powers were in power to now, where more and more cultures are considered equally. So what did we do? We delivered a workshop as part of the Introduction to Fine Art Context module. This was a two-part workshop. Level 4 fine art students were invited to take part in part 1 of the workshop, and level 4 foundation fine art students and fashion design students were invited to part 2. And approximately 20 students attended over the course of the double workshop. And one of the students' mothers attended as well, which was really nice. So this was the first part of the workshop, which focused on collaboration. And these are some of the images that students created together. So during this workshop, students were introduced to the general concepts and methods of collage. It was purposefully kept a little vague. I didn't go into too much detail. And they were given a 3-part task. Number 1, make a collage inspired by the work of an established artist by opening a book randomly. Number 2, make a collage based on the work of one of their colleagues. This could be a fellow student, a teaching assistant, or the module leader. And number 3, give that collage back to the colleague who inspired it and let them work on it to finish the collage. It was a really nice workshop, full of energy, and I think some great work got done. People were working in 2D collage, 3D collage, digital collage. Apart from those 3 instructions, no one was given any further instruction. So this work kind of developed and evolved intuitively. And we all thought it went really well. So that previous one was a collage inspired by Frank Stella. So the students had a range of books and they just had to open them up randomly, and whichever page, whichever artist was on the page that the book fell open on, they would make a collage based on that artist. So it's quite a challenge, this random artist thing. This collage was inspired by Kurt Schwitter's. So during this part of the workshop, we found that the traditional hierarchy structure in art education between the established artist, the module leader, the teaching assistant, and the student quickly broke down. Students randomly chose an established artist to work from for their first piece of work and felt empowered to take that artist's ideas and forms and to do what they wanted with them. So students had creative power. Through collaboration, students felt able to share, communicate, and contribute to the ideas of their colleagues, whether they were fellow students, teaching assistants, or the module leader. The collaborative task leveled the creative playing field so that everyone involved could participate freely and equally. All creative voices were heard. And I would argue that a hierarchical system that often exists in education, which is kind of the module leader at the top, then the teaching assistants in the middle, the students at the bottom, doing the work, was potentially flipped or at best equalized. So the module leader, the teaching assistants, and the students were all equal members of this kind of collage community. And this was done through the creative process of making collaborative collages. And the next part of the workshop we did a week later, and fashion design students and staff were invited to take part. So we had a room with about 16 people. Students were coming and going. This was the main sort of hub of the workshop. The students were working. So this isn't a picture of everyone. This is the best I could get at the time. In the second part of the workshop, fashion students joined with fine art students, as well as teaching assistants from each department. Foundation level and level 4 students attended. A brief history of collage was introduced. The Abo symbol collage by Ellen Gallagher was analysed, and students were led to understand the decolonial possibility of collage. I showed some examples of my work before giving students a 2-part task based on my practice. So the first one was make an A5 collage made only with found imagery. The second was make an A5 collage that combines drawing with collage. So they had a show and tell of the work that I've made and also of work made in collaboration with people. We had a really nice discussion about collage, people's experiences with collage so far. So those who've used it, people who haven't used it yet, whether they were nervous about using it or not. And generally, we all agreed that we were ready to get stuck into it. And they had 2 hours to make their collages. So it was quite a quick workshop. Work had to be done quickly, intuitively, with the risk of it going wrong and then being able to pick it up and put it back together again. It was very energetic. And at first, fine art and fashion students worked in disciplinary clusters. They kind of separated themselves, but soon started sharing tools and materials. After about half an hour, students, teaching assistants, and module leaders from both disciplines were working together. We were sharing bits of paper, working on each other's work if someone wanted to, moving around the studio, working together. Yeah, and a student's mother, who had never made collages, was visiting the university and worked alongside her daughter and other students to make collages. and her background was in textiles, and so ideas around textiles and collage were discussed. So it became a real vibrant a real vibrant environment for creating work. It was great. And this is some of the work that the students created. Our aim was to, we ran out of time. The university closes at 4 o'clock, so that the buses can pick the students up to take them home. We ran out of time, and my aim was to get us all together with all of the collage work as a collaborative kind of installation, but we just haven't been able to meet up since this workshop. So I'm hoping I can get that photograph and maybe some video taken and some like testimonials or sound bites from the students as well, just to try and get some of the energy across that was integral to this workshop. So things that we found out together is that collage is a method of working that anyone can try out, whether they consider themselves an artist or not. It's intuitive and can be used to communicate diverse ideas between people visually, breaking down potential language barriers. By making collaborative collages, students intuitively opened a space for the flow of creative ideas to happen between subject areas. By making collaborative collages, students began to understand that the perceived boundaries of their subject area are blurry and often blend into one another. So fine art blending into fashion and back again. By making collaborative collages, students understood that their ideas are of equal value to their colleagues, including participants who may be perceived to be somehow higher up than themselves. So TAs or module leaders, for example. And collage can be used to equalize traditional educational hierarchy structures to open creative spaces for people to exchange ideas in a free and equal way. And that's what's going on here. There are students in this picture from quite a diverse countries, and with collage is as kind of, we're all together anyway learning, but collage has really helped for different ideas to flow from one student to another. And for me, it seems to become a real kind of equalizer. It can be used to share experiences in ways that creatively empower people. So what I wanted to try and get across was that through the collage workshops and working with collage over quite a number of years now, it seems to be something that can really bring people together and to discuss ideas, bring people together from diverse places and backgrounds. It can break down all kinds of perceived barriers and bring people together creatively to open up these spaces where experiences and ideas and hopes and fears can be discussed in a visual way. And thanks, that's all I've got to say today. Is that okay? Thanks, everyone. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, there was a few in the chat. So I think Angela was gonna, there was a few in the chat.
I was going to be selfish and ask my own question.
Okay, go ahead. I'll just read them.
No, it's not a question. I just got inspired to give to give a workshop on collage in decolonizing fashion, because I'm redoing that fashion miscommunication, remember, Nada, that you participated in last year. So I was just going to ask if you have whatever a toolbox for you know, newcomers in how to do collage, or maybe even just, you know, make your presentation available so that we can spread the word and try to integrate collage into workshops that we give.
Yeah, I've definitely got resources and presentations I'd be more than happy to share. I'm also part of a network of collage artists, and for me that is kind of, collage is a kind of a metaphor for lots of things, but you know, this idea of museums taking things from places around the world and putting them into a museum, taking them out of context. In a way, collage does that, but in a far more, definitely in a better way. You're taking paper elements or, you know, materials and putting them together to create new meanings. And it really has helped me to work with all kinds of communities outside of university. So yeah, I do think it's an effective way of teaching these kinds of things that we're talking about. And I can definitely, if I'm guessing we'll have all our emails after this, so I can send you wherever I have. And yeah, if you want to do any collaging, I don't know where you're based, but if you want to do any collaging through the post, anyone, then I'm more than happy to have a go and work with anyone. I think that'd be great.
Amazing. I can't wait. I'll do some postal collage with you, James, definitely.
Thank you so much. Maybe I can read some of the questions, or I don't know, maybe Nada, you want to do it? Especially, I think there was a very interesting remark by Elke. She's saying, is it decolonizing or recolonizing to celebrate collage as a principle of modernist Western art as a decolonizing procedure? And then Sarah said, it feels it's always both. And then I kind of said, with a question mark, maybe it's appropriating this Western technique to reclaim agency. I mean, maybe you want to share your thought on that?
Me?
James? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'm just reading.
Okay, yeah. It's a good question. Thanks for the question. I'll try and answer as best as I can. So in terms of a fine art method, collage, yes, is a Western creative technique. It became, well, is said that it became an official fine art method when Picasso started using it around the time of I think it was between 1906 and 1911. But it's also been claimed that artists and craftspeople were using collage techniques as far back as the 1600s in Japan, for example. So even though as a fine art method, it's considered a technique developed by Picasso and Braque and Kurt Schwitter's Hannah Hoch, and you know, other artists who come after them. It's considered a Western fine art technique from that point. But you know, people like Brandon Taylor in this book called Collage: The Making of Modern Art, he tracks the history of collage way back, hundreds of years, to outside of Europe. So in some ways, yeah, it could be considered a kind of a technique that recolonializes the art world. If you focus on art as collage as a technique that began with Picasso, But if you do more research into it, you'll find that collage is something that has been practiced in lots of other parts of the world for a long time before Picasso started sticking bits of paper together. One of the reasons I thought it was that I think it's very democratic way of working is because on the one hand, you do have to have skills to make collage, but some of the most energetic and surprising collage work that I've seen have been done by people who have, you know, they've hardly ever picked up a pen. I mean, everyone's picked up a pencil, but by people who don't consider themselves artists, who have come to a workshop just out of interest, and have just started creating collages. And there's some of the sort of the most raw, energetic, surprising, sometimes quite dark work that I've seen. So it's a technique that, as far as my experience, anyone can use. And it also seems to be a go-to method for people who, for some reason, start making artwork out of the blue, maybe during, you know, midlife or in old age or something like that. So for me, it is kind of like a key to communicating and working and getting to know people who I might not have if it wasn't for collage. Is there any questions?
Yeah, James, that's really fantastic. What you've shared with us, the chat is full of conversation. But I'm just wondering if you would maybe stop sharing your screen.
Yeah.
That's fine. It's fine. So then we kind of have all of us in the room. We're gonna. There are a whole bunch of questions. I'm gonna sort of open it up. But I think Pierre, did you want to come in with a question or a comment? Question?
Oh, sorry. Did you?
Yeah. Did you want to?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Question?
Yeah. I'm quite shy, so I sometimes prefer just to type and stay silent. But you just outed me. Thank you. So no, just to about the question of collage. Is it? It was from Elke. Is it a colonial practice? I wrote that I believe it's actually using the tool of the colonizer to subvert, and I do a certain parallel to wax prints that actually are a collage of different elements. In some wax prints you do, I mean, I'm talking about, I mean, now we are dealing with North Africa, but I'm creating a link as well to sub-Saharan Africa with this practice of wax that actually gathers some cars and watches and all sorts of elements that are sometimes out of reach for the outcasts, the others. And so yeah, sometimes collage could be a great tool to actually subvert and empower.
I really love this idea as well of collage being taken into any format or any context, like in fashion, like with the wax printing, and that it's something that's it's more of a process, and can be kind of translated in any context, which is something really beautiful. I think as well, Mandish asked a question really early on, James. Really early on. I think it was, let me just scroll back up, sorry. I think it was something about, is it just the indigenous people's job to decolonize women? Let me get you the exact wording.
Okay.
Oh, I think it was something like that. It was right at the start. Is decolonization just for indigenous people? So Mandish had asked that at the start.
No, I think is something that everyone has a responsibility in. I think so. I think in terms of I think in terms of it is a responsibility on everyone: teachers, parents, nations that were former colonizers, and I look at, so that this thing that came up in the collage workshops was, it seems less so in the UK, but in my experience of teaching students in Egypt is that, the students are extremely respectful and respect the fact that there's a teaching assistant who is a kind of a level above them, and then there's the module leader, which is above them. Then there's the head of department, and then the dean, and there's all this hierarchy. And in terms of being a teacher and a module leader and just a person, a human in the world, if those hierarchies can sometimes be broken down so that people are equal across the board, it just helps with the flow of ideas. There's nothing worse than trying to make art and be creative if you feel that there's someone in some kind of power above you in the same room. It seems to squash creativity out of the equation. And what I've always tried to do, wherever I am, whereas in the UK, Egypt, South America, wherever, is try to create a space where everyone is equal to help the creative process along. Better collages come because of that. So I think it's not just for certain people to be working on decoloniality or decolonialization. It's for all of us together, I think.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I would just extend on that in terms of thinking about this as a sort of decolonizing fashion collective that we've put together. And this question of coloniality is everywhere, and this question of hierarchy and power, of silencing, sort of erasing, silencing. And so this question of hierarchy, and it collages, you're starting with the image, but the image carries so much power in terms of its agency in the world, or its meaning in the world, or its questions of representation. So to disrupt the image is to disrupt those networks to power, which starts to disrupt. So I think it really, really fascinating, and I think us working in kind of fashion, what is it to? And I think subcultures. If we really kind of think of collage as a fashion practice. Subcultures who have been doing this collage. I mean, I'm just taking tartan subcultures, but I think also indigenous cultures elsewhere that have taken a meaning system and disrupted that meaning system by adopting its wearing in another form, cutting it up or cutting it from its original meaning and re-meaning it in relation to other meaning systems. So yeah.
And another thing that comes up often as well is, for me anyway, collaboration is really important in this. So in one of the tasks, the students make a collage, then they have to swap it with another student or a module leader or a TA. If they swap with a module leader or a TA, if they're unlucky enough for that to happen, you can see there's a real struggle for that student to feel confident enough to work on top of that person's work because of this, hierarchical thing. But once we get beyond that, once the student has started working on top of another person's collage, collaborating with them to disrupt the image in some way, that's also an empowering thing, and it promotes the sharing of ideas across this perceived hierarchy. And again, just breaks things down a little bit is always done in a respectful way, and that's probably the key, is that as long as there's shared respect between anyone in these workshops, nothing can go wrong. And if something does go wrong, it's understood to be a supportive, creative, safe space where things can go wrong. And as long as we can talk about them and in a free and open way, these workshops always seem to become really beneficial for everyone involved. So the fact that images are selected by one person and then sometimes given to another person, or first modified and then given to another person, and then they kind of take power of the image. The creative, the power to select and to appropriate and to put one image to another is shared between all of us. So yeah, collage is good for all of these things: sharing, breaking down barriers, equalizing people, and creating a safe space, I think. And I have a colleague who heads up fashion. She wasn't in the workshop, but a lot of the fashion TAs and other module leaders came, and their students were using collage in one of their fashion modules. So it is a method that can be used in all kinds of creative departments or fields of knowledge.
Yeah, I'm seeing that there's 2 more questions coming from, and I think Bianca had some questions in the chat. Bianca, you're welcome to ask the question, or if you prefer that we read them out.
No, that's fine. I'm here. Well, yeah, actually, it's very funny. I'm in Cairo as well. So
Okay.
for me, this is very interesting. And I especially was very happy that this came up in the assembly, that we have a Egyptian, based perspective. Yeah, I'm a design practitioner, and I was wondering and meditating a lot about the difference of assemblage and collage lately. Why do we sometimes see the need to fix things, and why do we sometimes just do not? And I was wondering if this is reflected in the course as well. Basically, at what moment is what fixed and how? This was, this was the question.
There's 2 answers to that. So it is fixed in the way that the students made an image from disparate images. They glued them to a piece of paper, and essentially they won't change unless they get added on to later. However, the students were creating these artworks knowing that eventually they would be displayed as an installation where all of the artworks would be mixed together. And the idea was to have part 3 of a workshop where we would start curating all of the collages that were created. So there were about 40 collages in the end. And what I wanted to do was, move collages around, get students to talk about which collages resonated with others, and to have some kind of exhibition where each day we could get the students in, shift them around again. So in one way, the collages, they're fixed individually, but as a one piece of collaborative artwork, the possibility of combinations and ways of curating them that could almost be endless. And depending on where the collages are displayed as well, would make them have different meanings and different readings and this kind of thing. So on the one hand, they're fixed, but the way they can be displayed is totally unfixed, the opposite. And I agree with your comment in the chat that you know, fashion and collage, they go hand in hand. I've seen garments and outfits that I would definitely consider collage. There's an artist called Nick Cave, and his work, you know, it brings together ideas and materials and patterns and designs from all over the place, including sci-fi films and, you know, garments we might be wearing hundreds of years in the future. So yeah, I think collage and fashion work well together.
Yeah, but for me, I still need to say that in the word of the collage, there's coller, like to glue, and there's this permanent fix. So so I think even what Nada was mentioning, I think that fashion somehow has the power, because often things are sewn together and or knitted together. So I think somehow there's, and styling together. So somehow there's even, I think it's a very powerful thing how things not get permanently like fixed, but just preliminarily. And this, and the time span of the preliminarity is very interesting to think through. And so for me, fashion is mostly connected to this assemblage moment and less to the collage moment. I know collage is a lot used as creating outfits in the two-dimensional, but even there, sometimes it's more interesting to find ways how you can not permanently do this, but rearranging and rearranging all the time.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, the daily collages I make, they're often fixed down, but this is an idea that I might try working with. Some kind of way of having an unfixed collage is yeah, I like the sound of it. I don't know how it would look, but that's the exciting part of it. It's going to be a new experiment to try out.
Yeah, I think it's quite nice that bits can be changed and it's ever evolving then, like people can come along and take a bit off and rip a bit and kind of expose something underneath as well. But I was really interested as well, because I know there's a real difference between how we view educators in Egypt and how we view them, you know, academic staff in the UK. Like you mentioned that about, you know, there's this level of, I don't know, like there's a difference, there's a level of respect, you know, how they, but I also was wondering, did you feel when you were breaking down that hierarchy, that the production, like the final output of the collages were in themselves like less colonial or less westernized? Like, do you feel that that affected the input, even if it was something that was subconscious, that they were almost taken out of that typical academic kind of framework that they're used to, and they were allowed some freedom? And do you think that kind of affected the final outcome of their collages?
I hope so. I mean, something I'm constantly aware of is that I'm not Egyptian, and I will never know what the typical experience is of going through the school system and then ending up at university. But I hope that yeah, the way I sort of approach students and the way I am and the way I teach, you know, does help with these things to create a space, like I said earlier, where no one person really is in power for a short space of time, where because you can't be creative where you feel that there's someone, you know, going to tell you, you know, don't do it like this, try it this way, or do it like this, or, you know, whatever. You can't do it like that, you should do it like this. For me, it's more of a creative discussion. So at times I tell the students, look, we're all in this together. It's just some of us have done it longer than others. That's the only difference here. I've done collage a bit longer than you. You've got the kind of upper hand because you've done it less than me. I've got into my certain ways of working, where for you is kind of an open table of creation. You know, and I talk to them about the creative process and the fact that they're young and all of this is new, and that's the exciting bit. And that does seem to have a positive effect on, you know, getting these collages that express complete creative freedom. Or that's what I hope anyway. At least within the classroom.
Thank you. I mean, I think this is just such an important conversation around thinking about practice, and it definitely extends to a lot of the conversations that we've been having en route. So I think I'd like to say thank you so much, James, for sharing the collage, Fashion Liberation Collective North Africa, part 1. We've got 3 parts. So we're going to end our recording of part 1, but do stay with us for another, I put in the chat an hour, but actually we've got half an hour just to relax. And then we'll be heading off to Morocco shortly, like in half an hour. Yes. So, but thank you, James. Thank you, Nada.